Good morning, Social Studies 20-1, source number 2. We're looking at war crimes this week. Give you a few seconds to study the source and then we will take it apart. So, things we want to point out. I mean, when I first look at it, my eyes go right to the nuclear bomb explosion, Hiroshima in 1945. I start thinking about World War II. I think of Total War. I think of the Hiroshima bombing and then the one that follows on Nagasaki a couple of days later. I think about the firebombing of Japan on behalf of America to defeat them during World War II. That's what I think about when I look at that part of the source. And then I look to the right and I see Uncle Sam covering his eyes and then saying, be careful not to turn around and look at it. Now that could be because, if you look at an explosion that bright, you'll burn your eyes and blind yourself. Or maybe what I also think he's insinuating, the artist at least, is that they don't want to, if Uncle Sam symbolizes America, they don't want to be accountable for what they did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, and maybe the fire bombing campaign that came before the nuclear bombs too. It almost looks as though, yes, he's covering his eyes because the bright light would be blinding, but also he's covering his eyes because he doesn't want to admit what he did, perhaps. Maybe there's guilt. Maybe they recognize they did something wrong. Being that the theme of the week is war crimes, they're probably trying to not recognize American war crimes during World War II. And then a caption at the bottom, Hiroshima, Japan. President Obama laid a wreath at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Friday, May 26 in 2016. That was the first time a president had done that, kind of make restitution for what had happened during World War II. And I think that is the message of the cartoon, is that for the first time, America is looking back at what they did. Barack Obama is looking back on history and admitting perhaps a wrongdoing. Maybe we shouldn't have done that, and talk a bit about why they would feel guilty. The targets of the nuclear bombs and the fire bombings were civilian populations. This was a total war campaign after all. And so, hundreds of thousands, if not more, Japanese civilians were killed during the total war campaign during World War II. And for the longest time, America has not recognized that or been accountable to it. But now Barack Obama is being accountable to what happened in Japan in 1945. So recognition of past deeds by your country. In terms of our links, well, uh, I see foreign policy. This is an example of a country that is looking back on its foreign policy, maybe out of guilt and remorse. And if they're doing that, maybe it won't happen again. Um, Clearly, they would be questioning American ultranationalism or nationalism. Did they go too far? Was it necessary to do those things? You could talk about those links. I don't really see well, maybe America was ethnocentric toward Japan in the 40s, and it made it um, easier to do back then than it would now. That might be something that you take into consideration. It was a mass murder. Maybe you talk about that. In terms of perspective, I see someone who is, I don't know if he's rejecting nationalism, but for sure the artist would be challenging nationalism. Look what it made us do. Look what we're guilty of because of nationalism. Maybe we went too far. So challenging, maybe pointing out a critique regarding nationalism. That would all work fine. Can't think of much else you'd want to say regarding the source. Maybe one last thing you could talk about would be that because America was victorious in Japan, they got to control the way history viewed the nuclear bomb drops in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and even the fire bombings that happened before that. And maybe because they could control history, they could kind of bury it for the longest time, but sooner or later, history catches up with you, as has happened with America. Good job with that.